And I need a roll call vote with the place where you live, please.
Okay, we'll start with Commissioner Markham.
Good morning from Novi, Michigan.
Middleton.
Tom, you're on mute.
I'm in Committee Room A of the County Commission.
Gershenson.
Good morning, I'm in Bloomfield Township.
McGillivray.
Here, Madison Heights, Michigan.
Quarles.
Here, Southfield, Michigan.
Howell.
Pontiac, Michigan, here.
Long.
Here, Commerce Township.
Colwell.
Here, White Lake Township.
Zan.
Here, Huntington Woods, Michigan.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Let's do the Pledge of Allegiance. Open up my flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America.
to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And now I need an approval of the minutes. A motion for Commissioner Powell, supported by Commissioner Long. Are there any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Yes.
I just realized we don't have any minutes on this agenda to approve. We approved them
You're
last
right.
week.
Okay, I'm sorry. Skip that. We will, thank you. I see that. Okay. Okay, so approval of the agenda. And I am going to rearrange one item. We are going to move the number 4, the county exec approval of request for proposal to enter into a professional services contract agreement. That will be the number, it'll follow the human resource 5 and 6. Okay, so I need a motion to approve the agenda as amended. Commissioner Long, supported by Commissioner Powell. Are there any questions? Seeing none, those in favor, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Okay, do I have any public comment?
Good morning. Currently, your public comment lines are open. You have no written submissions and no one.
Thank you. Seeing no public comment, I will close it. Thank you. And then we have communications. I need a motion to approve the communications. Commissioner McGillivray, supported by Commissioner Powell. All those, this is to receive and file. All those, any discussion on this? All those in favor say aye.
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 Anybody opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Moving on to the consent agenda. And I am not going to read all of these, but what they are, Board of Commissioners School Drinking Water Station Program Participation Agreement between Oakland County Arts and Technology and the Academy of Pontiac. And this is multiple contracts to provide safe water drinking fountains throughout our school systems. So I need a motion for that, please, on the consent agenda. Commissioner Kowal, supported by Commissioner Markham. Are there any questions about this? Commissioner Middleton?
Yes, the ones funded, listed, are some of those being funded by the first item on the regular agenda, the shortfall of that funding? I was just wondering if that's.
My understanding is yes, we do need to approve that. Commissioner Long?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am wondering, when is the deadline for the schools to apply again?
Staff, can you answer that for me, please?
Yes, it passed on,
Sorry, go ahead, Andrea. Nope, Andrea, go ahead.
it was on October, the end of October, so all the applications have been received. This is,
Okay, thank you.
welcome.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, we need a roll call vote on the consent agenda, please.
On the consent agenda, Commissioners Markham,
Yes.
Middleton,
Yes.
Gershenson,
Yes.
McGillivray,
Yes.
Quarles,
Yes.
Howell,
Yes.
Long,
Yes.
Kowal,
Yes.
Zach.
Yes,
Madam Chair, you have 9 yeas, 0 nays.
motion carries. Moving on to the regular agenda. Item number 2, Board of Commissioners, approval of additional appropriation for the 2021 School Drinking Water Station Program. I need a motion. Commissioner Gershenson, supported by Commissioner McGillivray. And you are correct, Commissioner Middleton, it probably was a little bit reversed in what we did. And so anybody, is William Miller here? Anybody want to speak on this or need any introduction? This is, we are purchasing more water drinking stations in our upper level schools. We had money that was appropriated from last budget, plus we are using some CARES money and asking for a little bit more so we can complete it. Commissioner Quarles?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Have we had any additional schools to the list, more than we had, I should say, along with the ones we had last year?
I can't speak intelligently about that. Is there anybody?
This is Amy.
Thank you.
So, Amy Aubrey here. We had slightly less applications than we did in 2018, but we did have a very good response. And then, per Commissioner Middleton's request or question, we did have more requests than we initially had funding for. We had appropriated $600,000. We received approximately $60,000 more than we had allocated for. So that's why we're requesting the additional funding so that we can fulfill all requests for all of the schools.
No, I think this is a great program. I wish more of the schools would participate. And by the same token, I am aware of our funding.
Other questions for Amy? Thank you, Amy. I do have a question. Did everybody that applied get funded?
If you approve today's funding request, the answer to that will be yes.
Thank you. And then is this a closed opportunity at this point?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you, Amy.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Seeing none, let's call the roll, please.
On item number 2, Commissioners Middleton,
Yes.
Gershenson,
Yes.
McGillivray,
Yes.
Quarles,
Yes.
Powell,
Yes.
Long,
Yes.
Koa,
Yes.
Markham,
Yes.
Zach,
Yes.
and Terry of 9 yeas, 0 nays.
Motion carries. Moving on to item number 3, Management and Budget Equalization Division, Designated Assessor Interlocal Agreement. I need a motion, please. Commissioner Markham, supported by Commissioner Powell. And who's presenting on this? Do I have Sean?
Pete.
We have Deputy County Exec Sean Carlson. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, Pete Mena is gonna brief us on this one.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, commissioners. You can see from the text of the proposed interlocal agreement, this is a public act that was passed in 2018, requires every county in Michigan to name a designated assessor. So this is a person that would essentially be the backstop if there were any of our local assessing districts who fell out of compliance with the state's audit of minimum assessing requirements. If they did fall out of compliance, they would have a couple of opportunities within about a year to 2 year period, depending on their issues. They would have some opportunities to bring themselves in compliance just by using their own, the assessor that they were already using. The designated assessor is the absolute fail-safe, where if these assessing districts cannot bring themselves in compliance, the State Tax Commission will require them to contract with the designated assessor for the county to perform all their assessing services. As you know, we already assess through the Equalization Division. We already assess for the majority of the assessing districts within the county. We certainly don't anticipate that any of the districts for whom we perform assessing services will fall out of compliance. And the others probably will not either. And if they do, we anticipate they'll bring themselves into compliance without ever having to go through this process. Basically, the only reason we need to do this is because it's a state law. The state says we have to name a designated assessor. The equalization director, Dave Heber, is certainly the logical choice and has all of the required qualifications and more to perform this service if it were ever needed. And so that's why his name is recommended. It would be in his official capacity as the equalization director. And so if he decided to retire someday and the job would not follow with him, we would have to name someone new if he did decide to retire. So happy to take any questions. And I know Dave's here, happy to take any questions as well.
Before I take questions, do you have anything to add, Dave?
No, I think Pete covered it. I could give background as to how we got here, but I'm afraid that might bore the commissioners. So I guess we'll just leave it to questions and go from there.
Do I have any questions? Commissioner Middleton.
Yeah, Dave, do we do a majority of the assessing in the county?
Yeah, we do 32 of the 52 assessing districts.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, let's call the roll, please.
Can I say one thing, Commissioner Zach? I apologize. So the interlocal agreement, if it's approved by this committee and the full board, we will then send it to every assessing district in the county. They will have to sign it as well. So this is, we approve first, we send it to them, and then they will have to approve, and then we'll send it to the states.
So it's a new contractual arrangement.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments? Call the roll, please.
And item number 3, Commissioners Gershenson,
Yes.
McGillivray,
Yes.
Quarles,
Yes.
Howell,
Yes.
Long,
Yes.
Colwell,
Yes.
Markham,
Yes.
Middleton,
Yes.
Zach,
Yes.
I'm sure you have 9 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you. Motion carries. So now we are going to move into what was item number 5, Human Resources Implementation of a Voluntary Early Separation Incentive Program. And I need a motion, please. Commissioner Gershenson, supported by Commissioner Markham. And I see our Chief Deputy County Exec Hillary Chambers with us. Are you going to be the presenter or is it going to be April Lynch?
Chairwoman, we are going to tag team the presentation, and I'm going to start and then I'm going to turn it over to April if that's okay with you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. On behalf of County Executive Dave Coulter and our entire leadership team, I wanted to start today's presentation by thanking our employees. They have been very patient with this process. As all of you know, this process of evaluating our compensation structure started in 2017. So it's hard to believe, but they have been patient through a process that spanned a change at the Board of Commissioners, the passing of Mr. Patterson and the transition to a new administration, and this terrible, awful pandemic that we find ourselves in now. So I wanted to start by letting them know how much we appreciate their service, because at the heart of what we're talking about today, it's really the value of their work and also the trajectory of their careers. So I think all of us share kind of a strength of opinion about work. And so if you think about what we're talking about for each individual employee, I do think it comes down to, you know, the value of their work and the trajectory of their careers. And so I just wanted to kind of focus in on that. I mean, we've seen our employees step up repeatedly during the pandemic, you know, from the suddenness of the shutdown in the spring to those summer months where we've focused our efforts on recovery and support of our community and our community institutions, you know, and now to this really terrible winter surge where we've had to redouble our operations and our work patterns. So I know that we all feel a real sense of responsibility to ensure that the compensation of our employees is up to market rates and that we finally get this comp study over the finish line. We are blessed and really, you know, it's really been very fortunate that we've had April Lynch kind of lead these efforts. Not only in her career has she implemented and led each of the items that she is going to present today, but she also has a real knack and appreciation for involving employees every step of the way. And I think that you're going to see that in her presentation today. She's worked really hand in hand with Sean Carlson, our Deputy over Management and Budget. Because when you grapple with a government-wide compensation adjustment as we are today, you know, that very much changes the structure of your budget. And so we wanted to kind of put the compensation structure in a larger framework of how we see our workforce evolving over the next 5 years so that you can understand our vision for, one, how the comp study will be paid for over that time period, but also the items that we think make sense in terms of the restructuring that we're trying to do in terms of government operations. You know, really building on the experience of the previous administration and trying to look forward in terms of ensuring the value of our county services. We feel that the voluntary separation / retirement program that April will talk about today is an important component to that. and it honors really the long-term careers that we have seen develop here at the county. And so we look forward to your consideration of that second item on the agenda as well. I want to thank the commissioners on finance and off finance, because, you know, everyone has really spent the last 10 days not only refreshing our views on the comp study and the details of the comp study, but spending time with us understanding the suggestions that we're making in terms of the structural changes to the budget that will come along with bringing our salaries up to market rate. So we really appreciate that folks would, you know, ask their questions, ask for more information, and we think that that has really improved the final product and the presentation that April is going to make again to you today. So thank you so much for spending the time with us over these last weeks, and I will turn it over to April.
Great, thank you. All right. I'm gonna give you my screen here. Why is it not sharing here? Can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
All right, and does it say workforce management plan on it?
Yes.
All right, wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Hillary, for that introduction. I want to talk, as we discussed, we have two things on the agenda today that very much work in tandem with each other, but are two very separate resolutions. And I'm going to go over both of these in greater detail throughout this presentation. But really what I want to do is frame it. What we are really talking about, and as we discussed at the budget in September, is really understanding and knowing what our workforce is going to look like for the next 5 years and beyond. And one of the things that we wanted to take a look at is that we needed to understand the reason why my thing's not moving here. Here we go. We really wanted to make a good effort in understanding like what this meant for our organization. Again, not only over the next 5 years, but moving forward. And both of these conversations needed to be done in a way that we understood the direction we were moving in. And so that's what we're going to talk a lot about today, as well as both of those individual recommendations. So when we look at workforce management, you know, one of the things that is really important to know is understand all of the components that go into that. And when we go through this presentation, you'll see some core, what I call workforce management values. These, of course, are not all of them, but really keeping in mind what our goals are as we make these recommendations. And a few of them to keep in mind, and you'll notice a common theme throughout the presentation, is first and foremost, we want to continue to attract and retain our diverse and committed workforce. It's going to be really important that both components are discussed. This isn't just about attracting, but this is also just as much about retaining the employees that we have. But we also need to create some space in our budget. Our budget needs to be more sustainable, and we need to be able to focus on creating innovative programs as well as addressing capital improvements. And in order to do that, we need to know and understand our budget as we go out in the future years. And of course, it goes without saying that we want to optimize the value of services for our taxpayers. So when we keep that in mind, it's understanding holistically how we want to move some of these things forward and how they all matter to each other. And we will go over that in greater detail as well. I think I have a little bit of a delay here. Apologize. So first and foremost, what exactly does our workforce look like? I think it's important to understand as we walk through this presentation exactly what we're talking about. You know, one of the things that will be the primary focus, but I don't want to displace where we are with the other budget models, but we really want to focus on the general fund, general purpose today. But the workforce management plan is really covering and understanding how that fits together with not just the general fund, but with all of our employees. But really when it comes to the budget impact and things of that nature, the primary focus is on the general fund, general purpose, but we'll talk more about those other funds as well. So goes without saying that we're a service industry, right? So our greatest asset are our employees. And that's really important as we move forward, is knowing and understanding how we can maintain a solid workforce, pay them well, give them great benefits, and give them a great place to work. And so when we do that, we need to remember that, we are, when it comes down to that as government, almost 66% of our budget is employees, because we're service. And it's important to note that when you look at doing changes up or down in personnel costs, that's going to impact your budget the most. And you'll notice that is mostly what we talk about today, is how that impacts and how we're prepared to deal with that. So as you can see, I just wanted to show in our operating expenses, this is very common in government, that you would have such a high number or a high percentage of your budget being in personnel costs. It's again, we're service delivery, so that's where that makes the most sense. And so when you take a look at that, it's important to also see how that fits into our workforce. And you can see, again, 62% of our workforce is in the general fund, general purpose category, with 9% in proprietary or in special revenue and 29% in proprietary. So again, it's just a nice understanding of exactly how that fits into the scheme of things. So what exactly, when we talk about personnel costs, go into supporting our employees? Well, first and foremost, we have our foundation of what we call our salaries. On top of that, then we have what's fringe benefits and healthcare. We'll talk about those briefly here. So our fringe benefits are a little higher than you would see in normal communities, but there's a really good reason for that. Part of that 36% is the bonding that we did when we went out for the VBA. That is actually going to be paid off in 2027. And when you see that, once that gets paid off, I believe in that 36%, it is anywhere between 20 and 24% of that is the VBA. And so we are very fortunate in the fact that many communities have hardly touched their legacy costs as it relates to healthcare, and we're actually at 140% funded. So while it's a little painful now, there will be some relief coming to us in 2027. So fringe benefits beyond that, FICA, unemployment, any other percentages that maybe need to be applied across the board. Trying to think what that might be. Oh, workers' comp, things of that nature. That all falls in that 36%. Sorry about that. I had a blink there. The healthcare piece is also interesting in the fact that that is on top of the 36% and is also a huge component to what we do to provide a quality place to work for our employees. And you can see here that the average cost for a family right now is about $18,500. A couple is about almost $14,000, and I believe a single is about $8,000. So you can see there, when you add that up, the foundation of the salary, the fringes, and the healthcare, it's a big component to our personnel costs. And those are the things that we're going to talk about throughout this presentation. So what does that look like? So when you look at a 5-year workforce plan, you really want to take a look and understand the basis for which you're doing that. And what we want to do is start with what we call a foundation. And that foundation is making sure that we have a workforce that is paid at market, in some cases above market. We want to make sure not only, though, that we have the right competitive salary plan to keep our employees and attract, but one of the things that's key is making sure that we sustain that. And so it's great to implement a new salary plan, but if we move forward in the future and we're unable to make space to pay for that, then we just go backwards again. And that's been hard for local communities over the last few years, is just especially when 2008 hit, trying to keep up and recover from that has been a hard and long process. And we did the same. We were cut our wages back on our employees and never really truly recovered from that. And so creating that foundation and understanding what it is that we're going to need to retain and attract is going to be critical. We're also going to be looking toward the future on performance-based increases where it makes sense. And then also knowing and understanding how benefits play into the overall needs of compensation and, again, that attraction and retention of our employees. So once you know what that foundation is, now we need to know and understand what are those costs going to be and how do we get there. So it's important to note and understand that that foundation is very critical in how you move forward. And then knowing and understanding what that looks like is then how do you get there? And that's where where the next phase comes in, or really simultaneously, if you will, is what we want to do is focus now and reviewing and addressing the actual workforce needs of our departments. So you'll see throughout this presentation that our goal is to work with each department on a 5-year workforce management plan, understanding and knowing what their needs will be. We've talked a lot about during the budget process, taking a look at key performance indicators and measurements for all those departmental goals, which is really making sure that we are doing what we're saying that we wanted to achieve, and making sure that we have the right resources behind that to make those happen. The other thing we're going to want to do is work with our departments to identify tools and other ways that create efficiencies. I think one of the things that I've heard a lot about, depending on the department, is sometimes they just feel like they don't have the tools to do what they need. So that is another goal as part of this, is in knowing and understanding as we use technology, what can we do to create efficiencies and help our departments grow in that area. And then, of course, the ultimate goal as well is we want to continue to create space for more inclusive and diverse workforce as well, which also will help in retention and attracting quality workforce. So I'm going to just touch briefly on 2 items here, KPIs and lean governance. And I think it's important to know and how that fits into this whole conversation. So as we talked about briefly, the KPIs are going to be really critical for all of us, those key performance indicators, and making sure that we are providing the services that we said we would to our residents, making sure that, we're not spinning our wheels and departments aren't focusing on programs that maybe aren't working anymore. And so we are going to be working with our departments, getting them quality training on how to set those measurements so that we can see our successes. And that also helps our employees understand the value they bring to the organization and what role they play with that. So KPIs will be really important to making sure as we start prioritizing and look at more of a priority-based budgeting system of how that works. And that will be in tandem with what I call lean governance. I think many of us have heard of Six Sigma. This is, again, an opportunity to help grow our departments, help them be able to have the tools that they need to be more efficient, to provide better services for our residents. I like to use this example as it relates to Six Sigma. This is not about what can we do to make sure that we reduce, the number of employees we need. What Six Sigma really focuses on is, are we providing the best service in the best possible way? And in most instances, that does create efficiency. So the example that I use often is online. 10, 15 years ago, we didn't have a space for government to allow people to pay taxes or any type of service delivery online. They would have to come in or mail in a check, wait for something to come back. Well, by having the ability to go online, it creates space for people to have a much more efficient process just in time. It helps the resident get what they need quicker, but it also, I would imagine, in many instances, reduces the workload and the workflow for other departments. So that just shows you how that benefits both the resident and the departments. And that's the goal here, is what can we do to support you? What tools can we give you that are going to meet your goals, but help you do that in a way? Because what we really want to do is make sure that our employees are spending their time on value added. And that's exactly what both of these ideas will do. So this is just a high-level review of things that you'll be hearing about as we move in the future, but understanding how they fit in our workforce plan is critical. So what does that look like? How do we move that forward? I just gave a huge overview, and now let's dial in a little bit more into the details. So there's 2 things before you, a request and recommendation to update the compensation plan, and a request to provide a voluntary separation incentive, of which we're going to talk about in great detail. So what does that look like? So the first thing that we want to talk about is my recommendation to accept the compensation plan. I'll go back, again, to why we need that. Competitive compensation is critical now. We are in line now, government, to be competitive with the private industry, and not all areas. I mean, obviously there's different things that we provide as a local government versus private, but in general, when you're looking at compensation plans, and that's, to me, benefits and pay, it's going to be critical to not only keep our employees here, but recruit. And in both ways, having a formal compensation plan that's modern and updated will be critical. And again, we want to continue to create ways to attract a diverse workforce. So what does that mean? Well, let's talk a little bit more about another overview of the compensation study. I'm not going to go into a ton of detail as, again, you have all have been part of this process since 2017. But I want to talk a little bit at a high level about what the goals and the achievement was meant to be when it came down to this study. There were two primary objectives. One, we wanted to ensure that we were at market rate and we were paying appropriate wages for our employees. But second, and I think sometimes we get lost and forget what the other goal was to make sure that we had an updated classification plan that had not been done for 33 years. It was very outdated, given the use of technology, the needs for new degrees and our certificates have really changed what we need for our employees and what actual classifications they fit in. So not only did this company, MAG, look at where we were with market, we redid the whole compensation tool and classification system to make sure that people were actually placed in the job that they were supposed to be doing and getting paid that. So in some instances, we did have some employees who moved up, one or two classification grades because of those duties and how they changed with time. And so having that more updated to reflect the new requirements for many of these jobs is just as critical as making sure that these classification grades are also at market. So there was a two-pronged approach on that. It wasn't just about putting us at market. So just a little reminder of the timeline. This again started fall in 2017. The preliminary results were presented to the board in 2019. In fall of 2019, I did a series of town halls with employees as well as the commissioners to go over the findings. And during that process, what we found was that while the compensation plan and the study itself focused only on non-represented in the merit system, that we knew right away that in the union realm as well, that we were going to find some of very similar issues where we were not at market there as well. So we started to look at some of those studies as well and also understand what that cost might be. The other thing that we needed to take a look at or review was that while implementation is easy to do and implement, did we have the funding and what did that funding look like as you moved it down the road over the next few years? And so that was what we really needed to take a look at, was ensuring that we had the right understanding of the total impact that would be throughout the next few years. Implementation is one thing, but that compounding factor of moving down the future years, what I didn't want to do was implement a study and then find that we were unable to afford it when you started discussing union wages as well as, again, those general increases. So as we were looking and reviewing all of that in December of 2019 and looking at that plan of action, March hit and COVID hit. We had to stop what we were doing, focus primarily on COVID, go through the budget process, understand the impact of COVID on our budget. And finally, now in November of 2020, we feel like we're nowhere near normal, but back to figuring out what do these next 5 years look like and creating a formal plan of action, which you're going to see before you. So it's been a long process, almost 3 years by the time that this goes live. So again, very important that we move the needle on this. So what does that look like? So what exactly am I recommending? So I actually am recommending that we approve the salary plan that was provided to you in 2019 by MAG with a couple of adjustments and provisions, if you will. So one of the key components to doing a salary plan is making sure that once you implement that you have a program for moving the compensation plan forward. And typically what happens in an organization is that your salary ranges or your grade plan, salary plans move up with general increases that have been identified as appropriate for whatever organization that is. So for instance, in 2019, we gave a general increase of 2%. So therefore, the numbers you see before you include an upgrade, moving those original, the original implementation numbers up by 2%. And that's how we would move it forward throughout the next few years. If we had a salary increase of 1%, the range would move up another 1, or if we did 2, it would move up 2 or 3 or whatever it is that we choose to do. That salary plan moves with general increases to ensure that you're staying in market. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. I am also recommending that in lieu of general increases for fiscal 2021, as you know, we did do an equity adjustment for these folks and that should be on their paycheck this month. I'm actually recommending that we move each employee up to 2 steps, which I'm going to show you what an example of that is. The original recommendation was to just move them up to the next step that gives them a pay increase. So we'll talk about that in just a second on my next slide. I think a couple other components, one or more in how we administer it. There is an opportunity when employees get their review that they can move up double steps, but since we're moving up, recommending we move each employee up 2 steps, we would ask that for the remainder of fiscal year 2021 to ensure we can remain affordable. There be no future double steps on their merit just for this year alone. We can go back to normal next year, and I'll talk about that in just a second. The other thing that we'll be looking at that's not here today, once we get this implemented and have better understanding of cost, there is another outlier that can cause the salary plan to be a little stale, which is very common in any organization, is what happens when somebody reaches their max capacity within their position. So what happens when they run out of steps? So one of the things that I'm going to be looking at working with fiscal is to look at an idea of what that would look like and how much it would cost that once an employee hits their last and final step, that there's still an opportunity for more than just the general increase. With a successful performance review, they would get some kind of equity adjustment. Some places, maybe it's a 2% or a 3% or whatever we determine is appropriate, that once they've hit their 8th step, maybe that next year at their anniversary date, they have no more steps to go, but they could still get a equity adjustment for that time period. And that would be a one-time payment, much like we did on the equity adjustment this year. So that's something I'm hoping to bring back during the budget process this next year. I want to get this implemented and see what that looks like. So what does that exactly look like? So if you take a look at this holistically, I can show you that the old classification plan, I'm using an office assistant 2 as an example, is now in the new classification plan, now an office support clerk senior. So the grades have all changed based on the new plan. Some of the titles have changed and other things have changed to better meet the needs of those positions. So the current office assistant at step 5 was originally going to move to the $43,000 step. But in my recommendation, they would actually move a little bit like Tetris here. They're going to move to 43,211 because that gives them the next increase as well as the next step at 44. And then everybody will still get their merit as normal this year. So they'll be moving up 2, but they'll still be able to have their merit at their anniversary date. I think that will, the reason I did that was a couple of reasons. One, I believe that, again, these employees have been waiting 3 years. I think this is a better way to implement it, as well as in this year, given COVID and given the market around the area, I think CPI is going to come up very low, and many people within our region did not give raises this year. So if this is the year that you would probably not raise your salary levels. And again, that is not something in the future that I would suggest it not raising, unless again, of course, the market calls for very low pay increases. So that is an adjustment from the original proposal that came out to the board back in 2019. So now let's talk about what that means. So I want to talk a little bit about the resolution that you actually have before you shows the impact to the actual salary study that was just merit. Just making sure that we're staying in line with semantics, I guess, if you will. But what I want to show you here is the cost impact to the general fund also includes union wages as well of up to $2 to $2.5 million. All of our unions, most of our unions, I should say, have a wage reopener this year, and we're anticipating that they're going to have some market adjustments as well. And some preliminary studies make me feel very comfortable that the $2 to $2.5 million in there does include union wages. What also is included in this impact beyond unions, again, is the salary the new salary plan that does include the step increases as well. So again, these are of course just approximate but pretty detailed. I wanted to show more so that people and the commission could understand that we wanted to know holistically what this might look like if you were to do 1, 2, or 3% increases across the board with or without a comp study. So, and now as we go through each budget year, there are factors that we're going to be looking at that take a look at whether or not we are getting 1, 2, or 3s. And I'm going to talk about that right now. So what we want to take a look at is, first and foremost, market. We're going to be taking a look at CPI, the market, which is typically a big component of that, and many people use it, called the Mercer report. But then we're also going to want to look at our regional. We'll, of course, check and see what other governments are doing and other folks around us, and to making sure that we understand. So therefore, you can take a look at if market is calling for 2.5% increase and CPI shows that and Mercer shows that, then that's gonna go a long way to keeping us where we need to be in alignment with our salary plan. Now, the other factor, though, is that ability to afford, right? So what we want to make sure that we're going to be looking at is, how is our taxable value coming? What does that CPI look like? Where is our state shared revenue? How is that hitting that? So there's going to be this balance of market and ability to afford. But I think in most instances, since CPI is such a big impact on that, they're going to very much be aligned. So you're not going to be looking and saying, wow, we can really only afford a 1% or no increases this year if everybody else around us is doing much higher. It's more than likely all married to like CPI and all of those impacts that we're having in that region. So they should be somewhat aligned. So when we take a look at that every budget year, those are the things that we're going to take a look at. As you look at our current 5-year plan, typically what has been done is we put in a 1% placeholder, if you will. And while we may continue to do that, we may raise that. It's important to know and understand the impacts, though, that 2s and 3s have, because that's going to be critical. We want to make sure that what we're doing is not creating a plan that all we can afford is a 1%. We want to make sure that we continue to align our employees with market rate, or we're going to end up right back in the same stoop that we were by not keeping up with that market. So you can see that in general, going out a few years, you're looking at about an implementation rate of about 10.5 million, and you're going to end somewhere close to 13 million. Again, assuming you did 3% all the way around, but that's again at the high end. But so the goal here then is that these are impacts that will happen every year. So we need to make changes that are sustainable and remain. These are not just one-time hits. So when we start taking a look at our options and how to pay for this, we want to make sure and know and understand that these are every year. If we did nothing, meaning if we made no cost-saving measures, that we would be looking at, again, a general impact or a general fund impact of anywhere between 10.5 and almost 13 million toward the end of 2025. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about how we're going to fund that. So again, as we talked about, we're limited a little bit in our budget. So we have 4 primary sources that we're going to need to focus on and how to pay for that, because again, 66% of our budget is our employees. And so there are 4 things that we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk a little bit more about reduction of our full-time workforce through natural attrition. I want to be very clear. There is no conversation in here anywhere about layoffs. This is the beauty of a 5-year plan, is that you're actually able to look ahead and make sure you make those changes you need. So this is all through natural attrition, which will be a common theme throughout here. Again, we'll talk about that in more detail. We need to take a look at some cost containment adjustments in our fringe benefits, making sure that we are staying on top of our healthcare costs and getting ahead of that as well, so that doesn't get out of control. We also have a large contingency of part-time employees that we want to take a look at as an option of scaling back on that. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what I call fund balance supplement as we fund balance supplements as we support our 5-year plan. And that's going to be a critical piece, and I'm going to talk about those in greater detail. So what does that look like? Well, let's talk first about the big one, a reduction in our full-time workforce. A friendly reminder, where more than 900 employees were eligible for retirement in the next 5 years. We had 62 people retire this year, probably a little bit more since I've done this presentation. 500 of them, over half of those folks that are eligible over the next 5 years, are eligible as we speak. They're eligible right If you were to just high level, just take a look at the GFGP in 2019, and I use that year because it was an audited year, we ended at about $289 million in total compensation for our general fund, general purpose employees. So just looking, you can see a 10% reduction, again, across the board is anywhere from 28 million down to 5% reduction of 14 million in savings. So again, that's getting ahead of the curve, knowing and understand where our workforce is, and knowing what we have coming at us over the next year, over the next 5 years. So we're actually recommending an acceleration of this natural attrition for a couple of reasons. As Hillary mentioned, we have a lot of employees who've been here for a very long time that have worked really hard here. And this is not the first time that this organization has offered an incentive or a separation incentive. And so we want to be able to provide an opportunity for that to happen again. But more importantly, too, one thing it's important to note is that this time period is really an interesting and hard time for a lot of folks, in the fact that navigating COVID has added another layer of concern for some of our employees. And so just the timing seemed to be right for that. And that's also including not just those eligible to retire, but those that are full-time employees. They don't have to be eligible to retire to take that. Now, granted, I will imagine that the majority of people who would take advantage of this will be those that are eligible already to retire. But again, given the concerns that people might have for their own health, or working and navigating their home life with their children, or taking care of parents, there just might be some opportunity for them that they might want to take advantage. So we're actually proposing a separation incentive that allows 1 week of salary for every year worked. The cap will be for 26 weeks. So somebody who's worked here 26 years or more will potentially get half of their salary. Employees will have December 1st through March 21st to decide if they would like to take advantage of this opportunity. We have worked with, as part of our agreements, make sure that there's space in there for departments and employees to work together to make sure that we have the right succession planning, the ability to make sure that we're not leaving a shift, if you will, hanging with 6 retirements in one shift, as well as any project completion. So in some instances, there'll be an opportunity for employees to stay a little bit longer while we get through those succession plans, training, and project completion. And then we will be working with each department to create a 5-year sustainable workforce plan that will work with these departments to take these next 5 years to really take a look at their efficiencies and be able to navigate with a few less employees. So again, when we get to the fund balance, talk a little bit more about what the smoothing that we're talking about. So again, in general, the overall arching agreement here is 1 week of salary for every year worked with a cap of 26 weeks. And again, there is the only restriction is you have to have been here a year. So what does that look like? So there are literally probably thousands and thousands of scenarios that I could play at about how many people would take it, what that would look like. So in general, I did what I called 3 high-level reviews of what this impact would be to the budget and to our employees. So just taking into consideration a 25% acceptance rate, 50%, 75%, and in each of these scenarios, I did a 50% replacement rate. I will say this though, every department is unique. These are just targets, and I knew for sure with the sheriff's department, there was no way that we could be at a 50% replacement rate. So I have them in the 90s. So that takes into consideration. And again, it's just a target in a whole, but just know that I do not have the sheriff's department at that rate at all. So if you're to take a look at right now, we have 337 employees. Again, this is just general fund. This does not include the other funds that are eligible as we speak for retirement. So if you did if 25% of those folks took it and you replaced 50% of those, the incentive costs are about $4 million. But you start to, the reason it's not going to negatively impact the whole $4 million in those budgets is because you're going to realize the savings of folks leaving their salary while you fill their positions or not fill their positions. You start to see that right away. But then cumulatively, you see over the years that you keep saving that money moving forward, which is again why it's important that when you have opportunities to reduce personnel in a way that's like this, that the sooner the better, because it compounds. And that gets you about 30, I think about 30 employees, about 30 employee reduction. And again, remember, we're at about 2,500 for GFGP. And again, you look at the 50% acceptance rate, it doubles, and then at 75%. I will say that the chances of a 75% acceptance rate are probably pretty low. I would imagine that we're going to fall somewhere in between 25 and 50%. And again, these replacement rates are an average or a target, and it will really depend. Like, for instance, if one department loses, you know, a significant number of their workforce, if they're a huge component of that, you know, we may have to replace more than 50%. And you might have one department that has nobody eligible to retire. And so those are things, again, that we're going to be working with each department to go through and see what that looks like in their overall 5-year management plan. So that, you can see that the impact, again, it gets higher the more people that accept, but you also, the more people who accept and the less people you replace, it's a bigger impact to the budget. This is just one piece. We're not at all expecting that through this retirement or incentive that we're going to hit all of our budget goals. This is just a piece of it, and we're going to talk a little bit more about those other pieces. So before we move on to some of those other buckets, I do want to talk a little bit more about, you know, the impact of having the separation agreement. Is that, again, with or without the COM study, this allows us the flexibility to start taking a look at, in a very concentrated effort, to start reducing our workforce. I think, again, with it being 66% of our budget, that is where we need to take a look at. And so this allows us, though, the space to have that COM study so that we can attract new employees, but retain the ones that we want to keep as well. We also, again, need to create space for funding capital projects and creative programs. I mean, so we're always looking at, you know, during the budget year, what new programs do we want, what capital needs do we have, and if we continue to move forward at the vein we are, we just are not going to be able to sustain that. So we need to take a look at some of those budgets. And again, as I talked about before, the sooner you reduce, the more compounding happens and the larger the impact in future years. So again, that's just another reason to take a look at this opportunity we have right now. So what are some other recommendations that we can do to start taking a look at our overall budgets? And if you take a look at, obviously, when everybody looks at their budget, and they're all seeing the same thing, they're very heavy in personnel. There's another place that we could take a look at, and again, this is targets. You know, it's working with a department to see what their needs are, is our PT&Es. And again, I know there's a big component in here of the sheriff's department that we use at court, things of that nature. Again, taking them out of the mix, you know, you still have a significant number of PT&Es in the general fund. And so what we want to take a look at with our departments is that, you know, can you reduce some of your PT&Es with a target of trying to hit about 2 million? But again, if that's not going to work for the department and they need to, you know, we need to take a look at cutting more full-timer or whatever that looks like, we can. These, again, are just targets and ideas of how we can work with our teams. But they do have the ability to take a look at the PT&E market that we have. We have a significant number of folks in all three funds. We have almost 1,600 employees that are PT&Es. And there was a huge jump that happened when we did this buyout in 2008. A lot of PT&Es came on to help kind of get people through those that potential incentive, and then they stayed. So those are just, again, things that our departments are going to have to look at, what we can do to support them. The other one is fringe benefits, and I want to talk about that. So a couple of things that it's important to know that the county has not addressed any changes to our healthcare benefits since 2014, and no monthly contribution changes since 2009. I want to say for the record, this is not one of those ideas where here's some new compensation, we're going to take it all away for 20% premiums and $5,000 deductibles. Not at all. There are a lot of gentle changes that we can make and tweak to the plans that will save us some significant money, that what I deem as low or minimal impact to our employees. But I know that benefits are incredibly important and are really scary when you start to talk to people about that. So I just want to be clear when I say that these are a lot of gentle changes that we can make. But I think what's really important too is that that we include our employees in those conversations, because benefits are so near and dear to them. I'm actually going to be creating a benefits task force that will start in January that will include employees, both represented and non-represented, so we can start to go over what some of those things look like. And the goal is, though, that if we can stay on top of the little tweaks, then we maybe never have to go to those big changes that many communities had to do. And so that's something that I'm excited to include our employees in on those conversations and get their feedback as well. And again, there's a healthy balance, you know, on making sure we have good compensation and good fringes, but they have to be balanced in an ability to afford and also the ability to attract. It's hard for people to wrap their head around that people wouldn't want really great benefits, but people who have never worked in government before or worked here, you know, they're looking at the bottom line was how much money am I going to make? So again, another healthy balance that we can work through, but again, including our employees, and that's going to be critical. So our target savings over the next 5 years is taking a look at between 5 and 10. Again, it's just a target. And again, with us being, our workforce is fairly large, 3,600 people on our benefits, you would be surprised at what small tweaks can do to impact that budget. So we'll be talking more about that. Okay, last, one of the things that we really want to talk about is why I would offer supplementing from fund balance as an option to pay for this. I think that the major goal of this is that we are doing these changes in a way that's supportive to the employees who are here in our departments. And what we don't want to do, and we don't need to do, is come through and make quick cuts that are going to cause harm to our departments. We want to work with them to create a more thoughtful, methodical method in making sure and knowing what it is that they're going to need to do to maintain their services, but also helping them get those tools that they're going to need to be more efficient. In talking to a lot of our departments, they're all also really interested in making sure that this comp study passes because they're struggling getting talent as well. But they're going to have to partner with us. We can't just miraculously come up with that 10 to 12 million. So we want to give an opportunity to smooth out the process and to give this time to play out and make sure that we do it in a way that's very, very helpful and supportive and done as a team. We're going to be asking each department to help us, and we will work with them in a 5-year workforce plan that can continue to reduce some of our personnel costs, or in other ways that maybe they see that they could do that without impacting the service delivery to our residents. And then we also we'll be working with our teams to create those mechanisms, again, for those key performance indicators and those lean business opportunities, again, to help them be able to work with less staff in a much better and a more efficient way, making sure that they have those tools. Right now, as it stands, we currently have $5 million assigned in fund balance for the compensation study implementation. It's also in talking to fiscal that when in December, I believe you're going to get a list of carryovers and other opportunities that we have. We had $5 million also in play this year for the compensation study that we didn't spend. So we have about $10 million right now to help us maybe navigate some of that smoothing. We may need to dip in future years as well, but we're hoping as we work through all of these pieces and we work with these departments that we may not have to. But the goal would be that within that 5-year framework that we have found a way to structurally balance our budget, pay our employees well, and give our departments those tools that they need to really, really be able to provide those services to our employees or to our residents. So some other things that we're also going to be doing throughout this time period is in 2021, we're going to be analyzing all internal service funds. We want to make sure that all of our allocations are appropriately allocated to the departments. But it's also important to note too that, in the past, when we talk about changes like this, we always, like I am now, focusing just on general fund, general purpose, that it's going to be important to note that these proprietary funds are going to have to help identify those cost saving measures as well. So that the impact to the compensation study or just their rates are also readjusted to reflect those efficiencies, KPIs, and things of that nature so that we can maintain and understand those charges back to the general fund. The other thing that we're going to be looking at is a much deeper dive in reviewing and recommending a revenue plan that reflects our trends moving forward. I'm looking at a strategic budget plan that reflects our priorities. Again, talking about key performance indicators and metrics, but making sure that we are indeed meeting those goals and metrics that we talked about, but also within those priorities of our departments and commissioners. So ending two, we're going to be working on a training plan for all county departments on Six Sigma. This is, again, those opportunities to create efficiencies, but also increasing really quality services for our residents. This is really meant to help our departments have the right tools that they need, the right software, the right manual tools that maybe somebody at FMNO or WRC might need to allow them to be more efficient, safer, and provide those better services. So that we'll be focusing on that over this next year as well. So this was, again, a high-level review that I wanted to present to the Finance Committee with two formal recommendations before you. Recommendation number one is to approve the compensation study with those adjustments that I requested, as well as approving that separation, voluntary separation incentive. They are both two separate resolutions for you to consider, but I felt that they were married in so many ways that it made sense to do the presentation holistically. So now I open it up for questions, comments, more things you need to know, all that stuff.
Okay, questions. Do we need the screen up? Can you take that down, please, April, and then I can see people better? Thank you so much. Okay, so I see Commissioner Kowal. I'm going to recognize you to start.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I was just curious as to, I'll probably have more follow-up questions, but I would start off with how many employees do we still have right now that are receiving longevity pay? Any idea?
No, I don't have that on me. I can look. That's been, I think, gone for quite some time, so that list has dwindled.
Thank you.
Yep, I can get that for you, though. Having a hard time unsharing my screen, so I don't know if somebody else can undo me.
Yeah, I'll take care of that.
There we go. There we go. I got it now. I think I stopped, correct?
I'm on mute. Other questions? Commissioner Kowal, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm looking at, I guess there's a time period when people can accept this VESA. Was there any provisions for people that perhaps might be just shy of being vested with their health benefits and whatnot? Say, okay, if I went for another month or 2 months, then I'd be vested and I could get these retiree. Is there any way to reconcile that difference where somebody might want to accept the VESA but wouldn't because they wouldn't be fully vested?
So we were looking at that. It's a lot stickier, if you will. That still is being reviewed. But right now, this is the offer. It doesn't mean that I won't be able to come back with something of that nature. But we have what we call, for those that may not know, a Schedule C. Those are the last folks that are on healthcare that's not the RHS. So we have a couple handfuls of those folks. We are looking at that, but right now it's proving itself to be pretty sticky, but we are reviewing that.
You still have the floor, Commissioner Kowal.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I guess, to my knowledge, we haven't done, Oakland County has not done performance-based evaluations. This is a little bit new to the county. What is this being based on? And I just want to make sure with these new classifications that, I think a lot of people, family members per se, that crab about corporate America, that, in downsizing, they're forcing employees to do the jobs of 2, maybe 3 employees, and so they're getting a little bit better compensation maybe, but their workload has increased dramatically. And at the end of the day, I just want to make sure that we have satisfied employees and that they're able to do their jobs competently without being weighed down with, too many expectations. Can you
Sure,
speak to that?
Yeah, and that's something that, again, why we want to give our departments some space and grace as we work through that with each of their departments. The performance-based piece of that is something we're going to be looking at in the future, and that will also be with employee engagement. Right now, but that's something that we're going to be looking at in the future, but right now we actually don't have that in place. That's a goal that we'll have in the future.
Okay, thank you. I think that's it for now.
Okay, I'm going to recognize Commissioner Quarles.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I certainly would like to start off by thanking Deputy County Exec April Lynch for her work and her team and the other county execs that have worked on this. This was a long process, and I am so glad to see that we finally came to a conclusion on it. I do have a couple questions, and mainly for clarity. When these offerings that we're going to present to the employees on the separation, is there any difference if the employee is considered a exempt employee as opposed to a non-exempt? Will it be offered to all?
Sure. So actually, yes. So what we're going to be doing is, assuming if this gets approved, then we'll be working with the unions as well to get LOUs regarding these parameters, but it is open to everybody.
Okay. And another question, Madam Chair.
You have the floor. Keep going.
Okay, thank you. I agree with you. You probably will not get Avalanche's employees that you need to be concerned about what are you going to do if you get too many. But just in case that happens, any thought been given to that?
Well, again, that's why we did create space in the agreements to make sure that we all are in agreement when the employee and the department are going to separate. Because what we don't want is, again, like a certain shift maybe has 10 people on the shift and 9 people are ready to retire. We need to make sure that we have the right training and folks involved in that. So that's exactly why we did create that idea that we need to work with our employees and our departments to make sure that we do not have a mass exodus and that we do have a succession plan in play for those folks.
Okay.
And I believe that most employees would very much respect that and work with our teams on that. And I've also created a space in there as well that, if you're going to keep people beyond the May 21st date, that, I'll need to review that and approve that so that we make sure that we're not also keeping people here who may not need to stay if they don't want to. So we'll have some mechanisms in play for that.
Okay. And then my last question, what I look at as the critical skills, such as IT, police, things that fall, I should say employees that fall into those categories and others. Are they going to be offered this? I know you talked about the part-time and I said police, I meant sheriff. I know you talked about the part-time employees, but I was wondering how that's going to affect our sheriff department. And we over the years since I've been here, IT has had such a hard time getting employees.
Right. So again, Matt, why we're looking at that 5-year smoothing plan is to give people that time while they are hiring people back or hiring new people to replace those. And again, in the sheriff's world, I mean, I'm anticipating very little room there for lowering their workforce needs. But in other departments, it's not that we're not going to allow PT&Es. Again, during that smoothing time, that 5 years, that might be a gap that they need, but the goal is at the end of that 5 years that they've got a sustainable model moving forward. And again, I'm hoping that I believe that the new market rate and the new comp plan will also help us be able to recruit people who are going to be here at a longer period of time, and also get that enough where people are like, oh wow, okay, I can work, I can now afford to work at the county, especially on those high technical jobs.
Yeah. That's the end of my questions, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have other questions? Commissioner Middleton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One point of clarification, fringe benefits is 36%. But that didn't include healthcare, or did it include healthcare?
It does not.
Okay, what would be the percentage, fringe benefit percentage if you included healthcare? Around 50%? That's the
50 to
number
60.
I always.
50 to 60,
Okay.
depending on if you're a family or single.
Okay, and then in 2027, the bond will be paid off. How much will that reduce the fringe benefit?
Right now, I think it's anywhere between 20 and 24% of that 36% is the VBA. So it'll be a significant drop.
You mean our health care is only actually 4 or 5% because you got FICA and all those others as part of your fringe? And if you take 24% off of 36, you're just down to FICA. But then you got the difference between 36 and 50 is healthcare. Okay.
Yeah.
The other thing is, you mentioned that the current job evaluation is 33 years old. What are you replacing the job evaluation with?
The MAG study gave a new compensation model. That's actually going to come in December. It's got new factors that are more modern, that reflects our position, our job market and our jobs within the county. And that will come in on December. It'll look similar to what we did before, but very updated. All new factors, all new models, and all of those folks in there had done those classifications, had done what we call I think I'm calling it right, a job audit. That's how they got placed in there. That was all of that research that was done in 2017 and 18 by placing people in those classifications.
Okay, if an employee is asking for an evaluation of their job requirement, thinking that they're being asked to do more than what their original job classification was, they have an appeal process. Will there still be an appeal process?
Yep, they'll work with the compensation unit to put in a request to do a job audit or a salary grade review. I'm sure I've got both of those. They're probably cringing right now on what I'm calling them. There you go, Heather.
Okay.
Yes, Commissioner Middleton, we still have the job audit and the salary grade review process available to employees. And employees or departments can request, if a job has changed since this job analysis questionnaire was completed, they can send a request and explain what's changed since then. And we can look and see if there's justification to reevaluate the salary grade or even the classification.
Okay, and then that falls into the merit system.
Correct.
Where they can appeal back to the board and all of that stuff.
Correct.
That's still in place.
Yes.
That will be, okay. Next is part-time non-eligibles. You talked about reducing those, and maybe with the better wages, you're going to get a full-time employee. Now you're not only the wages, but now you've got, 30 to 50% of fringes that you're exempting yourself out of with PT&Es. Now you're paying 50% more for those costs, and you're going to save $2 million.
So that means,
my numbers I can't figure out how you make that work.
You don't. You have to reduce your workforce, and you can reduce it through reducing PT&Es and reducing your full-time workforce. But you're right. They're going to have to make decisions, and I'm giving them, these departments options. But in general, we're going to have to see a reduction in our workforce in all wages, not only just part-time but full-time. So it's just how they want to tool that and how that works for their departments.
Okay, that concludes my questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Do I have any other questions? Commissioner Kowal.
Thank you once again, Madam Chair. I'm wondering, April, if we could, with both of these resolutions, with the, VESIP and the compensation plan, would there be any way to get, I would like to get monthly reports back to the Finance Committee, especially since we don't seem to have a Personnel Committee anymore. And that's an issue I have with the one, there's a whereas in the comp resolution, it refers to Personnel Committee, which we don't at this current time have. But I would like to see some monthly reports come back to Finance as to the progress of both the VESIP and the compensation plan, such things as key performance indicators, some kind of a monthly report as to where we're at on this plan.
Are you making this an amendment?
I haven't come up with the language yet. I guess if we're okay with that, we can come up with something perhaps before we vote on this in the full board, and perhaps add that to the, make amendments for both resolutions in that regard. So I'm okay with today, but as long as we have the agreement that we will be, Finance Committee will be kept in the loop with some kind of monthly reports. I just wanted to get that question out there.
So,
if I can ask a question as far as the comp study is involved, when you're asking for a monthly report, the Human Resources Department, if going forward after implementation, if a employer department requests a salary grade review of a classification, the HR department actually brings that to the board, and it would be through the Finance Committee on a quarterly report to approve any changes to the salary administration plan.
Well, perhaps I'm not asking this correctly then. I realize what you're saying, Heather, but I guess, some kind of a progress report, I should say, per each month, where we're at in the process for both of these issues. That's kind of what I'm looking at.
Okay.
All right. Yep. Thank you. I'll work on getting some language together.
Okay. I would like to make a recommendation to Commissioner Kowal that the amendment gives us leeway about the committee structure, because there is talk about going back to our original committee structure where human resources may not be under finance, just who's ever in charge. And I also think that I would recommend a quarterly report. I think keeping this, and I'm watching my deputy county exec shake her head from an accounting standpoint. They have so much going on and we're used to doing quarterly numbers. So I would make a recommendation that your amendment language look at quarterly reports. And I do concur with the accountability. I just think that quarterly makes more sense.
I hear you, Madam Chair, and quarterly sounds fine with me. Thank you.
Great. And I'm happy if, you want to talk about language and co-sponsoring. I think that most of us agree that this is a good amendment. We can do it on the floor tomorrow. Okay, any other questions? Commissioner Middleton.
Yes, there's this whole compensation thing to bring jobs pay up to the market value. What is the total cost of that? I mean, it's all been switched around how we're going to pay for it and things, but I haven't heard an actual dollar amount that it cost us to institute this this program on today's employment.
Sorry, yeah, it's about 10.5 million to implement for us to move into the salary study. That becomes our new floor. That includes wages.
Okay, 10.5 million.
Mm-hmm.
And so then we had to try to find that 10.5 in the budget sometimes. Okay. Okay, that's all, Madam Chair.
Any other questions? Okay, so let me review. We have a motion for what is item number 5. You know, we had the whole presentation together, but we have 2 separate resolutions. So item number 5 is Human Resources implementation of a voluntary early separation incentive program. And so we have a motion and a second, and I'm going to call for a roll call vote. And I just want to let you know, Commissioner Middleton, that I'm going to request that both of these be put on the regular agenda, even if we vote unanimously. I think it's a big decision that we need to be voting on, just so, how's that sound? Okay, so please call the roll.
On item number 5, Commissioners McGillivray,
Yes.
Quarles,
Yes.
Howell,
Yes.
Long,
Yes.
Howell,
Yes.
Markham,
Yes.
Middleton,
Yes.
Gershenson,
Yes.
Zach,
Yes.
and jury of 9 yeas, 0 nays.
Motion carries unanimously. Now, we are moving on to officially item number 6, Human Resources Salary Administration Plan for non-represented employees. And so, I need a motion on that. Commissioner McGillivray, supported by Commissioner Markham. Okay, and is there any other information that you want to share, April, on this before we take a vote? Or are there any other questions on this? Okay, seeing, yes, Commissioner Middleton.
Okay, this is basically puts the 10.5 million cost into effect, and then also all the ways to try to come up with that money.
Yes.
Is that close enough?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other
Thank you.
questions? Seeing none, let's call the roll, please.
On item number 6, Commissioners Quarles,
Yes.
Howell,
Yes.
Long,
Yes.
Howell,
Yes.
Markham,
Yes.
Middleton,
No.
Gershenson,
Yes.
McGillivray,
Yes.
Zach,
Yes.
and a jury of 8 yeas and 1 nay.
Thank you. Motion carries. Now we are moving on to what was item number 4, County Exec approval of a request for proposal to enter into professional services contracts for strategic planning and an equity audit to improve county government services. And I need a motion, please. Commissioner Gershenson, supported by Commissioner Markham. And we have our 2 deputy county execs, Sean Carlson and Rudy Hobbs, before us. So please explain what we're doing. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. I will provide some explanation around the strategic plan and the KPIs. And then I know Deputy Executive Rudy Hobbs will be happy to answer and provide some explanation around the diversity, equity, and inclusion audit as well. And they both go hand in hand. What I want to make sure that we understand here is as we talk about a countywide strategic plan, we are talking really about the county executives departments. We're talking about the county executive department, management and budget, central services, facilities management, human resources, human services, public services, economic development and IT. Now, IT is not a GF department where all the other ones do have GF, just as an understanding, but all of those fall under the county executive. So that's the strategic planning that we are discussing and talking about. So I want to make sure that first and foremost that we understand that. Also, you heard in the presentation from April in regards to KPIs, lean government. You've heard about that from myself as well in the budget presentation, and you heard about that all the way back last April when we talked about revenue estimates and county executive Coulter laid that out. It is a strategic plan is critical, and we did do some work on this already. When I say we did some work, we together with the Board of Commissioners approved a strategic plan as it relates to economic development. And that plan is providing us a good vision. What we're looking at here is a strategic plan as it relates to all of the other departments, and to make sure that we have a comprehensive and integrative plan. The strategic plan isn't just a fancy term. It is essential and critical for any organization. It's just not for corporate America. It's for small businesses. It is for nonprofit organizations, and it should be for government as well. When we break down the composition of a strategic plan, a lot is packed in that word. We talk about foundation. And when we talk about a foundation of a strategic plan, what are we talking about? We're talking about making sure you have a mission, a vision, and values. We're also talking about the strategic plan itself, which is having goals, measurable outcomes. You've heard from Deputy County Executive April Lynch talking about those KPIs. When we talk about measurable outcomes, that's what we're talking about. Key performance indicators and strategic initiatives. And then the last part of a strategic plan is implementation. It's the tactics and down at the employee level. It is important and critical for us. This resolution goes hand in hand with what you just approved. It is important that we have a plan. Ben Franklin said, if you fail to plan, you are planning to fail. And so it is important that we move out on this. And so that is what this is focused on, is making sure that we're going to go out for a professional service contract, get some professionals in here to help us pull a plan together for county executive and how we tie all of these pieces together. What I would also like to point out is what you will see next week with the budget amendment coming forward is you will see that the county executives department had a favorable variance with our budget. Our overall budget was 105.1 million in regards to those county executive offices. There's a favorable variance with those departments of $11.7 million in savings that is going back to the fund balance. What we're asking for in this resolution is to take a little bit and reinvest in the organization in regards to doing good planning. And that reinvestment is about 10% of that favorable variance that was created in last year's plan, to make sure that we can continue to be operationally efficient and that we are measuring. And when we talk about these key performance indicators, it's important for us to measure effort, the quantity and the quality. How much did we do? How well did we do it? But also the impact and the effect that it is having on our residents. Are we better off? No matter what department it is, we need to have some clear guidance. And so that is what the $700,000 that we're talking about, that is the request for the strategic plan, the key performance indicators, and the lean government. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Deputy County Executive Rudy Hobbs, to dive in a little bit more in regards to our values as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
All right, thanks a lot, Sean, and thank you, Madam Chair, for giving us an opportunity to come and present before the committee today, and thank you, commissioners. So we are looking to do an audit of all our services that we provide, at the county. Regardless if it's housing, economic development, the services we provide through that department, our animal shelter, and we're also looking at health. Any services that we provide as a county, we're looking to do an audit and really kind of look at it through an equity lens as it relates to evaluating the current the availability of those services to the entire county. We know that, particularly in health, we see where we're aligned pretty much along, Telegraph, and, we have one in Pontiac and one in Southfield. What is that? What message does that send to the northern communities and to the western communities, in our county? And what are those services and accessibility look like, for those populations who live there? And so, that gets into us kind of looking at barriers, identifying gaps in the access and opportunity. And then also just looking not internal, but also looking externally, we want to bring back an assessment that help us really think through how do we close those gaps? How do we make sure our services are, we have the right services for the entire county? And so we really want to have, it's a company called AECOM that actually won the bid when we went out for bid. And so we'll have AECOM go through, look at every single one of our services through those lenses. So looking at gaps, barriers, and availability. They'll come back and their deliverables are, to really kind of come back with an assessment in terms of our gaps, in terms of our barriers, identifying our populations and who experiences barriers to our services. And then also recommend training, education, and strategy in terms of how we are able to deliver our services better. So in a nutshell, that's what the RFP is about. I mean, it's really kind of thinking through pretty much how we deliver services better. I mean, this is, it's not any more complicated than that. We really want to take a fresh look. This administration, myself, Sean, Hillary, Dave, and April, take a fresh look at the services that we provide and figure out how we can do it better.
Okay, I have Commissioner Long to start, followed by Commissioner Kowal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a couple of questions. So the price tag is big. It's 1.3 million. And I realize the timing when we're doing the compensation study is good timing for that. However, I'm just wondering if this is redundant because in April's presentation, she said that we're going to ask each department to provide a 5-year workforce plan that will reduce personnel costs by continuing the same or better customer service to our residents. So I am thinking this can be done internally if we're asking them to do a 5-year plan, and we can incorporate the all the other things that you're asking for. That's one of my points. My second point says we already went out to bid and it hasn't been before finance. So we have an AECOM company already in line for this. That's my second question. And my third question is, do we, if we do this study, do we have anticipating savings to county taxpayers after we receive this information to improve county services? So to me, this is a large price tag, 1.3 million. It seems like we already went out to bid according to Rudy Hobbs. And I think in April's presentation, which was excellent, thank you, April, it sounds like we're asking the departments to already do this. So I think that this can be done internally. I'm not sure we need a professional contract to do this. I think we have good people at the county. And if we're asking each department to provide a 5-year plan already, it can be incorporated with this. I think that is a large price tag.
Can you repeat hold on, Sean, can you repeat your third question, Commissioner Long? I know there was
I think my third question was do we have so if we do this study and we get all these results back, I know Parks and Recs, we do a lot of consulting and studies and this and that, and I think a lot of them can be done internally. So this is just my personal opinion on a lot of these professional contracts. But I'm wondering on the third question was, do we have anticipating savings to county taxpayers if we get this information and streamline our county services? Like if we follow their guidelines or whatever their plan that they're going to provide us, do we have any kind of cost saving estimation?
Sean, do you want to go first?
Yeah, so I'll answer question one, and then Rudy, I'll leave you to question 2 and 3. So the first part, in regards to a big price tag, I just want to break down the price tag. and some facts here. The 700,000, we are out on the street right now in regards to a request for a proposal. We have not made a determination. We do not have any bids in. So in regards to the strategic plan and the KPIs, that is on the street. 430,000 was a competitively bid process. Rudy will talk about that in a few minutes. Then there is 200,000, and that 200,000 is for the Board of Commissioners. So I just want to make sure we're breaking down the 1.3 to understand where the buckets and the level of efforts are. What Rudy and I are speaking of is the 700 and the 430,000. And then in regards to, I'll just make a comment. Yes, we have great employees that can help us do this work. But we need professionals in regards to building a strategic plan. Not for the professionals to tell us what to do, but to interact with our employees and make sure that we're working together. Sometimes when you have employees just take a look at the own organization, they may still want to run certain operations, and there needs to be an independent third party to push back and pull and push against that a little bit. So I will say that having outside counsel and professionals to come in is certainly valuable. So I'll turn over to Mr. Hobbs for question 2 and 3.
Well, I just want to add on that too, Sean. I think that, there's a distinction between customer service and how we, deliver better customer service. There's a distinction between customer service and then the actual service that we deliver. And so when we're looking at, the services that we provide, there will be, an opportunity for, our outside consultants to look at how, our employees deliver those services, what type of training our employees need to deliver those services. But they're genuinely looking at, the services that we provide and where we provide those services. So there's a distinction between that. And I think that, to Sean's point, while we have a great group of employees, I think that the work that we're looking for this vendor to do is really get out there, conduct focus groups, engage community leaders, engage nonprofit leaders, who are very much in the center of some of the work that we're and services that we're providing, and really start to engage people to make sure that we're delivering the right services, the services that people actually need in the way that they need them, and then accessibility. So I really believe that there's a distinction between customer service and then the community services. As it relates to the RFP, full transparency, we actually, we're really walking down a different route in terms of the dollars that we were going to use for this. And I really thought that, after a conversation with our team, particularly Sean and Hillary, we didn't want to rush this process of evaluating our services. As you know, CARES Act dollars, have to be spent. The product has to be received by the county by December 31st. That was the route that we were going to go down. But I think as we kind of really thought through this and really saw the value, of having, an auditor of our services, we thought that it would probably be best if we didn't, have a firm deadline at December 31st and really kind of walk this through the commission process where we were able to use different dollars that will allow us to bring back a thorough assessment, sometime in the first quarter of next year. So we went through an entire RFP process where the RFP was drafted, was sent out. We did the interviews, had an evaluation committee. And so we really, again, went through a process to get to a particular vendor. But, I wanted to make sure that I was very transparent with all of you to make sure that you knew that there, one, was a process, two, there was a different route that we were going to go. But, given the time restraints, we really thought it was best to kind of work through the process through the Board of Commissioners to get this done.
Madam Chair, if I might add something as well to Commissioner Long's good questions. We see April's presentation and this strategic planning linked very much together Because if we're going to work with our departments on instituting the KPIs and the lean processing that will make our operations more efficient, we need to bring in experts and who can train our directors, our supervisors, our managers on these processes. So that training, I mean, Sean could probably do it, but we want to be able to engage our directors and supervisors levels on this training in terms of those key performance indicators and the strategic planning that we're doing, so that we can marry the workforce plan, the customer service, and the KPIs and the strategic planning all together.
Chairwoman,
You still have the floor.
just one follow-up. And I understand the timing because it makes sense to do it when we're doing the other stuff. I get that. Mr. Hobbs, so you're saying though, before we were going to use CARES Act money, then it went out for RFP and we got the ACOM. Now we are not using CARES Act money. We're going to take it back a little slower and not get it done before the end of the year. So now we will be going out for RFPs. Is that correct?
When you say we're going to be going out for RFPs.
Right. Now, are we going out for proposal for someone to take this contract, or ACOM is going to take it? That's what I guess I'm asking.
Well, I would say that we've been through a competitive process already. So we have a competitive process that we have already been through, and that process lasted from maybe about almost a 2-month period. So I don't envision us putting this back out on the street, given that we have, really kind of checked the boxes of all our procurement processes. And because we've checked those boxes of the procurement processes, I would not envision us going back out.
Yeah, I think the key component here is the funding source has changed. The key component is this was not a sole source. This was competitively bid. There was a thinking that the funding source was going to be CARES Act. And after further deliberation, we said, hey, it would be better to use GF funds, do this the right way. We are not going to use CARES Act as a funding source, even though that we were advised that there was some eligibility under it. So.
Okay, thank you for now. I'll let someone else ask questions if they have it. Thank you.
Okay, I have Commissioner Kowal next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I have the same question as Commissioner Long regarding the RFP process. And I'm just, we recently approved a resolution to go out for bid regarding the dispatch / sheriff's training center / EO center. And we approved a resolution for that. Now I find out you guys have already gone out to bid for this, and now you're requesting the funding for that. So that seems, I don't know if it's a one-time situation because you switched what you were doing as far as using CARES Act funding to not using CARES Act funding. But I would like to see the horse before the cart in the future in that regard. Also, I guess I question right now, it's good timing, but it's crazy timing, because how are you supposed to do evaluations when we're in the middle of COVID, which is basically changing everything? And there are, I think, to me, obvious, very apparent things that we could be doing already. Like, I understand that, I talked to some local elected officials, not in my district, but surrounding, that had a great deal of difficulty getting through to the county. I was asked, when is the county going to open back up? Because I understand that we don't even have like a way of ringing through, how if you call it department, then it rings through to somebody's county cell phone because they're working from home. It's just like there's a lot of chaff in the air right now. And I think that how do you even come up with how do you have a good feel for what we need to do when all this, to me, I think you should let the dust settle a bit first and then maybe take a look at this. I do question the timing of it. I do understand the need to have an outside consultant because, our county employees are going to, look at it relatively speaking and maybe not be as analytical as they could, but I do feel like the county employees should be involved as well in this process, and I hope they will be working with this, whatever outside consultant. We used to have like incentives for county employees to come up with cost-saving measures and so on and so forth. I know that's a lot to throw at you, but I'm not real happy about the going out for bid first before coming to the board, and then I question the timing and I guess how we can get an accurate view of what we need to do, where we're lacking, what we need to change until this COVID situation, till we're out of that. Thank you.
So I heard two questions there, Madam Chair. If I could address Commissioner Kowal, I'll take the first one. I don't know. I want to make sure there's this notion or suggestion that there may have been some wrongdoing here by going out for an RFP. There is no wrongdoing here at all. There was an understanding that this potentially was CARES Act. If this was CARES Act, then it would have went under county operations, which both Commissioner Markham and Commissioner Kuntz stand on. So that would have had to get approval through that process. So that's already established. Once it was changed, there's two ways for professional services agreement, which is a new policy that was put in place last October, November timeframe. Any consulting agreements that are over $250,000, they either need to come in front of the Board of Commissioners prior to going out, or at a minimum, they need to come out at the back end of the process. So the fact that the equity audit is coming at the back end does not make it wrong. The only reason that happened was because there was a decision not to use CARES Act. So on the $700,000, we're coming at the forefront. So there's a couple of ways. During the budget process, we shared with every department. We said, do you have any contracts that are professional services in nature that are expiring this year, or brand new contracts? Because if you do, you need to make sure during the finance and budget hearings that you share that with the commissioners in order to get approval. So that's one way to get approval. The other way to get approval is exactly what we're doing here today, is coming in front of the commissioners before any work is done, whether the bid has already been put out or on the front end before the RFP is being done. So I just want to make sure that there's any notion that, there's something wrong or shifty going on here. That is not the case at all. And in regards to the chaff in the air, Rudy,
Yeah, I was going to speak to that. I would say that, there's a strong appetite in the community to have a conversation about the services that we deliver. And we saw that, throughout, our efforts to deliver services during this pandemic. And, whether that would come from a township supervisor, whether it come from a pastor of a church, small business owners, there's definitely an appetite and light has literally been shown on the services that we provide, and we're having these conversations now, right? Sean's having conversations with small business owners. My housing department, having conversations with, homeless shelters, so these conversations are happening. And yes, and to your point, there are, measures actually being in place, but those measures aren't part of a comprehensive plan. Those are, reactionary measures that we're taking, measures that we're using to fill, gaps and holes right now. And so what I would like to do is have this conversation, from a 30,000 view, and really kind of look at how we deliver our services, who needs those services. I think that, the pandemic, kind of really brought to light, a lot of different gaps that we have. And I think that, it's incumbent upon us as government leaders to really address that. And I think that, with people, again, wanting to have the conversation now, I think this is a good time for us to have that conversation, to talk about, where the gaps are, what the barriers are, and really start to put the safety net in place, that's going to cover this entire county.
Okay, I have
Wait,
Commissioner Long,
Can
are
I-
you done? Okay, Commissioner Kowal is next.
Thank you. I
followed
just
by-
want to thank Sean for the explanation, and I guess the process was a little bit different, and it varies from time to time, so I understand that, no wrongdoing there. And then as far as doing the evaluation during COVID, I think Rudy gave a pretty good explanation on that. I guess that COVID has brought to light a lot of areas of concern and where we could be doing better. One, of course, would be actually reaching county departments when people are working remotely. So, okay, I'm good on both counts. Thank you.
You're on
Oh, I'm
mute,
sorry.
Elaine.
Commissioner McGilvray next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I have a question regarding the consulting firm. Will they be doing outside studies with residents, businesses, churches to get to their final goal?
Yes, there is a component of outreach, that we require to have in the RFP. And so with that being said, we will be reaching out to community leaders, to churches, to, different nonprofits that kind of work in the health space. So we'll be covering all those different services that we provide. We'll be talking to those community leaders that kind of operate in that space. And that will be engaged through focus groups and also conversations.
Do we have an estimated time as to how long that this survey is going to take?
The entire audit or just a survey?
All of it. When will we get an answer as to the improvements that we need to make?
I'm anticipating that sometime maybe March, April, that we'll have an assessment that we can provide an update to the board.
And my final comment is this. I agree that it seems like an awful big price tag on this item. But I also think that it's very important that we get an outside look from those organizations as to how we can do a better job providing those services to the county residents, businesses, and so on. So I guess I would say that I would approve it at this point. That's all, Madam Chairman. You're on mute again.
I know. Do I have any other questions? Commissioner Middleton.
Yeah, Sean, there was 3 RFPs, is that correct?
There's 3 projects. The RFP that Rudy talked about, which they went through, had a competitive bid process. There is an RFP out on the street right now where there are vendors reviewing, asking questions. That isn't due back until December. And then the last project is the 200,000, and that deals with the Board of Commissioners, and I'm not sure of the status of that one.
Okay, I have, Chris, do you know anything about the 200,000? Chris Ward? Yeah.
I do. I thought I was dodging the bullet so far. I appreciate Sean and Rudy for that. The $200,000 would just go into our budget. We do not have a contract out, an RFP out. We do have a contract with Public Policy Associates. We used Mitch Bean and Robert Klein, you might recall, during the last term. I think the concept here is to have some funding available for consultants as needed, as policy development is requested, or the task forces and study groups that you create, projects you create, some assistance from outside vendors, and perhaps some strategic planning, maybe centered around retreats.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Madam Chair, I'm going to vote no, but I'm asking for the 2 RFPs that are out there, and be able to study those before the board meeting. So.
Okay,
That's all I have. Thank you.
thank you. Any other questions? Commissioner Markham.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A lot of my questions have been asked by other commissioners, so I appreciate that, and I'm not going to be redundant. I do just want to say that I appreciate that the executive staff is looking at all of this in a holistic way and really trying to understand across the board what is the right way for us to be moving forward in dealing with our employees and also our customer base. So I appreciate that the conversation has been long and across several topics. I am going to support this, and I think it's the right thing for the county to be doing going forward. So thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I am going to call the roll. Pam, we're going to call the roll, please.
Oh,
We can't hear you. Can't
She's
hear
not-
your sound right now, Pam.
Turn it off and on.
Pam,
No, we
turn
don't
your
hear
sound
you.
off. Turn it on and off.
Madam Chair, would you like one of the staff to call the roll while we're waiting on Pam?
That would be terrific. Thank
Okay.
you.
Pam, do you want to maybe exit out and come back in again? That usually is it's the Control-Alt-Delete equivalent for this.
Thank you.
Okay, Commissioners Zach,
Yes.
McGilvery,
Yes.
Long,
No.
Markham,
Yes.
Howell,
Yes.
Middleton,
No.
Quarles,
Yes.
Gershenson,
Yes.
Kowal,
Yes.
and I'm operating off the screen here. Did I miss anybody?
I don't believe so. Okay. Motion
Motion carried. I'm sorry, yes. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Now we're going to move on to, let's do item number 7, and then I'm going to recommend a 5 or 10-minute recess before we go into closed session, okay? But we have Jim Nash, item number 7, which is Human Resources, Water Resources Commissioners Classification Salary Adjustment. And I need a motion, please. Commissioner Powell, supported by Commissioner Markham. And I want to welcome our Water Resources Commissioner, Jim Nash, and tell us about what we're voting on.
April, did you want to do it, or you want me to go ahead and?
I'll just lead you in. How about that? So, sorry, I think they ended up getting separated, but so while we do have a new salary plan that you've hopefully that we're sending to the board, there will still always be some outliers that may not fit into the classification system. And so Commissioner Nash has a few that are, especially in WRC, are rare positions or positions that are unique that may not fit in the factors that we have. And so him and his team have a request to try to take, I think, about 4 or 5, maybe even 6 folks that for now we'd like to keep off the salary plan since they don't fit in all of those requirements. Because again, hopefully we're going to keep these rare, few and far between, but I do know, especially with his team being such a unique department, that's what he's presenting today, and our team supports that. So Commissioner Nash, you can add to that if you'd like.
Certainly. Yeah, we have several positions here that were the compensation study we felt didn't go far enough, and the issue is especially in these specific areas. A couple of them, the business administrative services. This is something that we need because we need to make sure that everything is overseen and all the different things we do in that. The business systems manager, to me, is one of the more important ones because we have 35 different programs that we use on all our facilities across our spectrum, and which is more than most IT folks oversee for their systems. And this is something it's vitally important to what we do. If we don't have our systems in order, things collapse. So this is something that has an immediate impact on our systems. We have a survey party supervisor that is very important. It's higher than what we would normally consider that. They really have two jobs, surveying and overseeing projects. And again, over these past few years, not long before this compensation study started, I lost one of my managers to another organization because they could pay more. We've lost some of our engineering supervisors, some of our top folks because of that. If we don't keep these folks, we lose that institutional memory that is really, again, extremely important in how we operate our systems. So to me, this is something that's just, we have to have this. When we did the representative units, that was something because every time one of my people would get a certification for a higher level, local communities would immediately offer them more money than we could pay. And that, again, that goes all the way up to their top folks. So this is something that's vitally important to us. And remember, we only get about a little over 1% of our funds from the general fund. All our systems are paid for through the systems that we operate and maintain. And I have 350 employees with a $500 million budget. So when we have an increase like this, it'll just barely touch any of our systems in terms of the funding of them. So this won't have an impact on our general fund. It won't have the impact of any significant impact on our communities, but this is going to allow us to keep the employees we need to keep. So this is why we're doing this in my office. And that's it. If I have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I'm going to recognize Commissioner Gershenson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Jim, thank you for coming and listening to our whole meeting. I really appreciate you taking the time to advocate for your staff because this is kind of how the whole thing started when Phil Bertolini came to us and said, I can't hire IT people. We're too low. And he really brought this whole issue of us having to raise our compensation to all of us. And so it's your department. You know what's valuable. We don't. We need to hear from you, and we need to understand how important these people are to a good functioning water resource department, which we all want. So I appreciate you taking the time. I appreciate you working with administration on it, and I think I will support your request.
You know, I've worked with both our current administration and the previous administration. Again, like you said, Phil Bertolini got where we were coming from. Bob Dada, we worked very closely with. He understood where we were coming from. We just need to make sure that we can serve the people at the maximum efficiency and ability as we can, and that's what we want to continue doing. This will help us do that.
Okay, so do we have any other questions? Commissioner Middleton.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Jim, the resolution has classifications and minimum, midpoint, maximum. This is the projected amounts that you're talking about, but I don't see what the present pay is. Can you provide me a list of what the present pay would be?
We can do that. Tim Prince is on here. Can you shed any light on that, Tim, or? Oh, I thought he was. There you go.
Okay. No, I'm here.
Yeah, I don't have that information in front of me, Tom. We could quickly put it together though and probably get it over to you. I don't know, I don't think we can get it to you in time, before the vote, but it's something we could definitely get to you, you know, later today.
Okay, thank you, Tim. So, thank you, Madam Chair. That's all I have.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, let's call the roll, please. Let's see if you're
Can you
back,
hear me
Pam. You are. Thank you.
Okay, good. Okay, and item number 7, Commissioners Long,
Yes.
Howell,
Yes.
Markham,
Yes.
Middleton,
Yes.
Gershenson,
Yes.
McGilvray,
Yes.
Quarles,
Yes.
Powell,
Yes.
Beck.
Yes.
Madam Chair, you have 9 yeas, 0 nays.
Motion carries. Would anybody like a 5-minute recess? Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute recess and then come back for closed session. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
webcasting come back.
I think we got
Sure.
everybody. Yep.
Okay, that was quick.
Muted.
Okay, and then I need a motion that will authorize the Corporation Council County Administration is authorized to proceed in accordance with the directives discussed in closed session. Commissioner McGillivray, supported by Commissioner Middleton, and I need a roll call vote, please.
Commissioners Middleton,
Yes.
Gershenson,
Yes.
McGillivray,
Yes.
Quarles,
Yes.
Powell,
Yes.
Long,
Yes.
Howell. Yes. Markham,
Yes.
Zach.
Yes.
Madam Chair, you have 9 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you, and thank you all, Finance Committee, for hanging in there. We did a lot of really good work today, and I am going to adjourn Finance, and thank you, Malcolm and Joellen, for coming. Yes, Commissioner Powell.
Thank you very much for taking this up today.
I actually just have a question for Long. When is the last day we can come get some cider and stuff? I know you about to close.
Oh, next Wednesday, day before Thanksgiving.
Okay. Sorry, I love her
Okay.
donuts and cider. It's so
New
good. I
business.
gotta
I was a donut maker yesterday.